most grateful that you took time to join us this morning for breakfast. My name is Umar Rusanda Amadou. I'm a journalist. I work with Channel 1 Television and City FM. I'm going to be your moderator for this morning, and I'm happy to be here because often we know that in election years, that's the time that politicians and political parties and governments become very reckless. So what we are here to do today is to check the level of recklessness in the past and see how we are going to, fix that in the future and possibly prompt the government that this is how badly you have done A, B, C, D in terms of the management of the fiscals. So these are the measures to put in place to prevent that from going forth. I think that's a very fair thing, and it's important and crucial that we are doing that in an election year. This program, put together by IMANI, with support from Oxfam, of course, is going to be enlightening. IMANI is many years old and has been in the space where they check governments. We have the manifesto coming later on, I think in a month's time or so, where you track the manifesto of the government in power and see which ones they have performed by what percentage, and then you score them. That will be coming up later. But for now, we are simply here to see the level of fiscal recklessness that has been engaged in. So in an index, and we're going to rely heavily on the Auditor General's report. Now, the audit service by law is mandated to do the auditing, and what they have presented is what is going to be used as a baseline. I'm not going to bore you. I'm going to invite someone with the capacity to tell us the full details of what this program is about and what the idea behind this particular program is. So ladies and gentlemen, with a round of applause, help me welcome Mohammed Anwar Sadat Adam, his programs and policy lead at Oxfam Ghana.
Thank you very much. I wasn't expecting this powerful introduction, Umar. And I think it's my brother who's going to give us the details, not me. I'm just going to maybe stand here and welcome people to this event. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, distinguished guests, all protocols observed. I am honored to be here today to stand in on behalf of Oxfam to do this opening remarks. I'm privileged because I think I've been part of this journey over the last 12 years. I was privileged to have been part of the maiden one, which was done, I think, 2015, 2016, then followed by the second edition of 2020, and now we are into 2024 as part of this. And in all these instances, what we have seen or observed has been that the report and the findings have always been very critical, not just of what has happened, but also providing recommendations of what we can do to address some of these challenges that we face as a country, especially in relation to public financial management. That has been one of our bigger challenges. This year's report launch, I believe, is as significant as the maiden one, as well as the one that was launched in 2020. It is significant for us because we believe that this is one of the ways that we can ensure accountability and make sure that public service holders provide the necessary leadership that we require to make sure that this country develops. If I may just go back a bit in history, I believe when we launched the first one, Ghana was under the 16th IMF program, right? And today we are launching another one and we are under the 17th IMF program. And for me, it's basically like one of the ways that will help us to address some of these challenges. We recognize that this index is more than just a presentation of data or of figures, but it is a call for action, a call for us to reflect on the need for fiscal discipline and fiscal accountability in this country. As we move forward, the insights that will be shared today, I hope, will inspire discussions, drive decisions, and inform the needed policy and practice changes that we need in this country to ensure prudent fiscal management as well as accountability. I would like to extend our sincere thanks to IMANI Africa and the team that put together this report for your invaluable contribution. As we proceed with the presentation of the report, I encourage all of us to engage with the findings and recommendations, ask questions, and consider how together we can collectively advance the need for fiscal discipline and accountability in this country. Thank you for joining us today for the launch of the 3rd edition of the Fiscal Recklessness Index, and I look forward to a productive and engaging event today. Once again, you are all welcome, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohammed Anwar Sadat, Programs and Policy Lead for Oxfam Ghana, giving us that welcome address. So that is a summary of why we're here, essentially. But we're going to get the detailed report. And let me say, kindly take your notebooks and your pens and note down. If you are the techie person too, then go on your phone and note down on the notepad whatever is going to be presented here, because there will be an opportunity for questions and comments after the presentation. So to do the presentation for us, the man who has done it all, done the research, well, for and on behalf of IMANI Africa, ladies and gentlemen, with a round of applause, help me welcome Dennis Asari. So Dennis is a senior research associate with IMANI Africa. Boss, you're welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you very much for taking time out of your morning to join us for this all-important engagement. And I think my friend from Oxfam set the tone very well for us, and Umar also started very well that it's election year. One of the biggest fears is that are we going to be fiscally reckless and go back, or we are going to stay within our limits and ensure that we are fiscally disciplined? And I think that is the overarching goal of what we are trying to do here. And so by way of starting, the purpose of the Fiscal Recklessness Index is to look at the little revenue that we have. Are we actually using it effectively? Are we disciplined in the management of our fiscals in terms of how government raise revenue and spend our revenue? And to do that, I'll start by laying a bit of context of where we are, the purpose of what we do, the methodology we use, then a brief walk through the data analysis, then the conclusions and our recommendations. So we know that Ghana's economy is in crisis, and we are not in crisis only because COVID happened or Ukraine occurred. We are in crisis because for so many years, we have been pretending to be implementing reforms. We have been pretending to be committed to public financial management reforms and ensuring fiscal discipline. However, if you look at the history of our public financial management, we have not actually committed to the institutional reforms that will actually guarantee fiscal discipline. And so we have been committed to short-term programs, and so we have seen short-term results. So we have shorter periods of stability and longer periods of instability. And our 17th appearance at the IMF actually tells our whole story of shorter period of stability than longer periods of instability. And that is all because we keep dancing around fiscal discipline, fiscal stability, and act as if we are really committed to long-term discipline, but we are not. And so currently, since 1997, this will be the 5th time that we are implementing a public financial management reform. And all of these have been supported by donors investing heavy amounts of money into reforming our public financial management so that we are fiscally disciplined and do not jump in and out of IMF programs or economic reform programs. And so for 5 times, we seem not to get to the task, or we seem not to be clear about what really we want to do, and we are not really addressing the challenges in our public financial management system. So if you look at the last 4 public financial management reform programs that we have done, and the current one that is being funded by the World Bank, if you look at the problems that all of these have sought to address, they seem to be the same. So since 1997, because we have not been committed to real public financial management reforms that will guarantee that fiscal stability, fiscal discipline, and give you that quality of public service delivery, that is why our economy is in crisis. And this is how we've done it. We have always been smart to cover it with both local and international borrowing. And so because we are able to cover all of these indisciplines under borrowing, sometimes it doesn't show. So the only time that we got shut out of the international financial market, the economy is in deep crisis and we are struggling heavily. Even though we are supported by the IMF, a country that has gone through an IMF program the 17th time, is facing a lot of low revenue mobilization, and we have created a very expensive public expenditure on ourselves, you would expect that economy will stop the bleeding, cut unnecessary expenditure, and ensure that we set ourselves on a path of fiscal discipline. But we have not. If you look at between 2021 and 2023, we had almost 21 billion Ghana cedis from COVID funds alone. Out of that, 47% of them was not used for COVID-related activities. Till today, we don't have a single report that shows us that the county GVG contract for monitoring telecommunication revenue mobilization, there's not a single report that gives us value for money. That shows that because of that intervention, we are seeing value for money in monitoring telcos. Another shocking thing is that we have seen an assorted number of government electronic or digitization or electronic investment trying to increase revenue mobilization, but the IMF document is replete with evidence that show that we are not collecting enough revenue. And so while we are spending a lot on infrastructure to collect revenue, the revenues are not coming. And the revenues are not coming because at the institutional level, there is no fiscal discipline. And we are seeing a lot more public expenditure. And that is why over the years, our PFM history, we've still not found a solution to addressing the fiscal indiscipline. And that is why Ghana's PFM landscape, irrespective of the nature of reforms that we implement, we still do not see fiscal discipline. And that is why the fiscal recklessness attempts to gauge how ministries, departments, and agencies actually collect revenue and spend revenue, whether they are in line with our public financial management reforms. And the reason is that these are the agencies at the center of public service delivery. Therefore, if we can reduce poverty, it rests on these agencies. If we can accelerate quality education, minimize inequality, it rests with these agencies. So if these agencies are being fiscally reckless, then you should expect that you won't be able to address poverty. That is why till today, almost more than 40% of our population are multidimensionally poor. And the major areas of deprivation is education, health, and basic things like access to water and even sanitary facilities. And over the last few years, even though we've been able to address extreme inequality and some form of poverty, the current IMF program tells us that if we don't take care, more people are likely to go into poverty if you don't put in the needed fiscal consolidation or the needed reforms that will ensure discipline and ensure value for money, which means that how public institutions spend and use our revenue or spend public revenue is important. And that is why we are happy you were able to join us. And that is the background to what we are doing. Maybe all that I have said, you might think that, oh, Imani, you can never please Imani. But it is not just Imani. The former chairman of Parliament's Finance Committee, he was just the immediate past chairman who was removed, Honorable Kwaku Kwarteng, recently issued a public opinion. And these are the exact words he used to describe how we have managed our economy. So if all that Imani is saying is not even appealing to you and you think Imani can never be pleased, this is a member of the ruling government, former chairman of the Parliament Finance Committee. And this is what he says. The economic problems Ghana is facing today at both the national level and in households are also the cumulative effect of many decades spanning different governments of bad politics, economic mismanagement that have characterized the governance of our country. Since independence, we have survived by constantly overspending our means and borrowing to finance overspending. And many of these expenditures are just bad prioritization. We always offer higher interest to lenders, borrow more, use a part to repay previous debts, and rest to pay for the current year's overspending. So we have been running our country's economy like a Ponzi scheme. And the only day that money stops flowing into the Ponzi scheme, the economy is in a crisis. As if this is not enough, another member of the ruling government, who was in the 7th Parliament, the chairman of the Finance Committee, had this to say. He said, I argue that when the IMF are in town, we get things done right. If you go back to the program we had under Atamil's 2009 to 2012, fantastic. The macro indices at the time were the best we have seen in a long time between 2009 to 2012. The moment the fund left in 2012, everything went berserk. I don't even know how to pronounce that word very well. You see, everything went back to factory reset. If I were the finance minister, I would pack the economy at the IMF. Now we are in a hole. You have individual bondholders going to be affected, and the financial sector is going to crash. I'm telling you now, where we are as a country, this is not the time to massage issues. The banks, I don't want to mention names, some of them will collapse. This is the former chairman of the Finance Committee of the 7th Parliament. And this is the remark of the immediate past chairman of the Finance Committee, and these two are members of the ruling party. Now, another esteemed economist we have in this country, Mr. Kwame Pinim, last 2 years at an IMANI Reform Dialogue series, just made this statement as if he was prophesying. He said, where the Ghanaian economy is now, it's not pretty. And the environment cannot be described as enabling. And the main area of focus for policymakers should be the expenditure side. We should not waste the current crisis, but instead use it to create a better and sustainable macroeconomic environment. Therefore, there is a need for the Fiscal Council to be involved by giving a nihil upstart over all the big ticket expenditure of government. And so what IMANI says seems to align with everybody, even within the current administration and even out of the current administration. So that tells us that despite all that we have been doing around public financial management, we are actually not committing to the real reforms that will improve institutional effectiveness, bring more fiscal discipline, and ensure value for money. And that is why IMANI and Oxfam has a product that we call the Fiscal Recklessness Index, for understanding how ministries, departments, and agencies have collected and used public resources. And so the overarching aim is that we look at the Auditor General's report because it comes with a lot of information, but we distill it to look at what were the main reasons why people did not comply with the Public Financial Management Act. Then we develop an index to rank the institutions to show which institution was the most fiscally reckless and which ones seem to be complying with the Public Financial Management Act. And what is even important to us is that we always want to find where is the problem in terms of our public financial management and why have we not been able to fix it? What are the political economy dimensions to addressing these issues? It goes through about 5 stages for us to get to the index. This is just a summary. I'll go into the methodology proper. So we have a database that we collate the Auditor General's report for ministries, departments, and agencies. Then what we do is that we normalize the data. So some of these data sets come in billions of Ghana cedis, thousands and millions. So we try to put all of that data set between 0 and 1. And that's what we mean by the normalization. Then we determine the weight of the 7 typologies. So the Auditor General has about 7 typologies for measuring either your fiscal discipline or indiscipline. And so we also work with these typologies. Then we develop a Fiscal Recklessness Index. Then we run the data. Then it gives us information about which MDAs are fiscally reckless and those that seem to be performing better. But I want to draw your attention to something. If you look at all our PFM laws, we have all the institutions, the legal framework, the provisions, and all the measures that should make us fiscally disciplined. But we are not fiscally disciplined. If you look at the internal controls that we have built within our PFM framework, fiscal indiscipline should not be happening. We should see sound fiscal discipline or sound commitment to quality expenditure control and addressing economic mismanagement. However, the problem is that the political economy does not allow these to work. And so this institutional framework that we have, if they were supposed to work effectively, then what we will see is that we will see quality service delivery here and we see sound fiscal discipline, but we are not achieving any of that. That is because we have never been committed to any real reform. And this is how the Auditor General defines financial irregularities. Now, the Auditor General defines it as either losses that had been incurred by the state through the impropriety or lack of probity in the actions and decisions of public officers, or on the other hand, the savings that could have been made if public officials and institutions had duly observed the Public Financial Management Act. So sometimes the argument government agencies make is that some of these irregularities are recoverable, but not all of them are recoverable. If an agency uses the wrong procurement method to procure and you don't get value for money, you can't recover that loss. If revenues are uncollected within a particular year, and because of that, government cannot fund key development projects, even if that revenue is collected the following year, you can't recover the losses that you incurred within that financial year. And these are the broad definitions and the typologies of financial irregularities. And for us, that is why the Fiscal Recklessness Index is so important. And so the first Fiscal Recklessness Index covered the period 2014 to 2016. The second one, we looked at 2015 to 2020. And this one, we focus on the Auditor General's report between 2021 and 2023. And so we choose normalization of the data because we believe that it's not the data that we gather does not show signs of a normal distribution. And so what we do is that we want to reduce all that data set between 0 and 1. And so we adopt this methodology to normalize the data so that all the irregularities now can be seen or can be recorded between 0 and 1. Now, we also apply proportional weights to the typologies of irregularity that I initially showed. These typologies, we apply proportional weight. And what the proportional weight means is that in order to ensure objectivity and balance, the weight we assign to a particular financial irregularity represent that particular irregularity's contribution to the total financial irregularities within the year. So for example, if you look at tax irregularity in 2021 represented 92% of the overall irregularity recorded in 2021. So the weight that we attach or we assign to tax irregularity will be 92% or 0.92. So that is what we mean by weighing, which means that when we put it in the index, the weight of a particular financial irregularity typology, it's reflective of its contribution to the overall irregularity for that particular year, so that we are able to trace where the irregularity is occurring and we ensure objectivity and balance in the methodology. So all of that weight sums up to 100. And we put, this is the mathematical calculation that we run. So we put all of that, these are the typologies of irregularities, these are the weights, and also we put all that data set together, we sum it up, and we're able to compute the financial irregularity for a particular year, and also be able to calculate the Fiscal Recklessness Index from this mathematical framework or method that we have developed at IMANI. Now, the key findings. So between 2021 and 2023, the total financial irregularities recorded by only ministries, department, agencies was 4.9 billion Ghana cedis. That 4.9 billion Ghana cedis, it is double of the budget of the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection between 2021 and 2023. Within 2021 and 2023, what we observe is that the District Assembly Common Fund was owed almost 6.5 billion Ghana cedis, which means that government has failed to transfer almost 6.5 billion Ghana cedis to the District Assembly Common Fund, which is a constitutional requirement. But because of revenue under recoveries, government is not able to do that. But the financial irregularities MDAs were incurring, or the irregularities caused by MDAs, that's the 4.9 billion, was almost 75% of how much government owes to the District Assembly Common Fund. If you try to juxtapose it to GDP for each of the years, the total financial irregularities of 4.9 billion is about 2.63% of our GDP in 2023. So which means that financial irregularities, which may be losses incurred or savings that could have been made by MDAs, represent almost 2.63% of our GDP, which is very significant because averagely between 2021 and 2023, the share, if you look at how much we spend on a ministry like Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection, because this is an institution at the center of poverty reduction. How much we spend on that ministry is just averagely about 0.5% of GDP per year between 2021 and 2023. If you are spending just 0.5% of GDP on Ministry of Gender, meanwhile, the financial irregularities of your MDAs is almost 2.63% of your 2023 GDP. And between 2021 and 2023, over that 3-year period, every year, financial irregularities is about 0.7% of our GDP. That is how much we are bleeding. And you would expect that a country at a level where we are not collecting enough, we have to borrow to shore up either locally or externally. Within that same country, this is the level of fiscal recklessness or financial irregularities MDAs are incurring. Very, very significant. Now, if you look at how much the government spent on the free senior high school between 2017 and 2021, the government estimated about 5.18 billion Ghana cedis. Meanwhile, 4.9 billion has just been wasted, or these are losses or savings that could have been made between 2021 and 2023. So that tells us the level of weaknesses or the weak commitment to fiscal discipline within the MDA levels. And what you see here is that you can see tax irregularities stand out among all the typologies. If you look at the total financial irregularity of 4.9 billion, 4.4 billion Ghana cedis can be traced to tax irregularities. And these are the tax irregularities. Taxes that have not been collected, taxes that have been collected but have not been paid to the government, VAT, businesses that have been issued VAT receipts, they collect the VAT but they don't give it to government. And also state agencies who are owing taxes and not paying. For example, in 2021, about 10 state institutions owed almost 1.25 billion Ghana cedis of taxes that they had not paid. And we had almost about 361 million cedis that VAT traders had not paid to the government. And these are VAT that you and I have paid at the business level, but government is still yet to receive it. If you look at cash irregularities, I think in 2021, at the Department of Urban Roads, a particular finance officer was able to withdraw illegally or fraudulently about 1.5 million Ghana cedis and nobody saw it. That is the level of financial, and this is not IMANI saying, this is what has been validated by the Auditor General, submitted to Parliament, and which the Public Accounts Committee has sat on it. So if we were seriously committed to fiscal discipline, some of these things would never have happened. Now, if you look at the level of tax irregularities, that is, out of the 4.9 billion financial irregularities between 2021 and 2023, 4.4 billion was tax irregularities. That means that if you take every 10 cedi of financial irregularity, 9 cedis can be traced to tax irregularities. But this is the same country that the IMF document is replete with enough evidence to show that we are not collecting enough. Another major source of tax irregularities was oil marketing companies who are not paying their taxes on time. Sometimes their debt is rescheduled, but they still not pay. And that is also evidence of weak tax enforcement at the institutional levels. And so these are people we know they owe us, they owe arrears, but we are unable to collect them. And these are revenues that could have come in to support other government projects, but we are not collecting them. And so tax irregularities, it's one of the biggest problems within our PFM now. There are other challenges like debt, loans, and advances. If you look at the LI for the Public Financial Management Act, it says that if you initiate a debt or loan or advance to any public sector worker, the spending officer must lodge it on the GIFMIS. That is the Ghana Integrated Financial Management Information System, which means that once it is lodged on the GIFMIS, it must be traced and it must be collected. But we give loans and advances and we never collect them. Another area is cash irregularities. Cash irregularities are simply cash transactions that MDAs undertake, but they can't find documents to back them up. sometimes these are misappropriation. And what was telling in this analysis is that we are seeing a lot more of other fraudulent withdrawal or embezzlement. In the second Fiscal Recklessness Index, it was more of payments or transactions undertaken without documentation, which means that, okay, once they find the documentation, you can do the adjustment. But this time around, we are witnessing embezzlement, fraudulent withdrawal. Meanwhile, this is the time where we have also uploaded some of these agencies onto the gift list. So how do they go around embezzling and withdrawing funds fraudulently, and we don't see? And this is what the Auditor General also reports. And so if you try and do a breakdown annually, you can see that tax irregularities represent about 90% across the 3 period, averagely about 90% of the financial irregularities. So what you see is that if we lose or savings about 10 cedis could have been made, 9 out of that 10 cedis of irregularity is traced to tax. And we need tax revenues. For example, in 2021, 90% of the tax irregularities were traced to oil marketing companies not paying their taxes on time. But it is just this same sector that we implemented a program led by the Strategic Mobilization Limited, SML contract, where we are able to monitor oil marketing companies so that we know exactly how much they should pay and go and collect them. But we seem not to find our way. What is even telling is that this is the period that we also implemented what we call the e-VAT and e-tax filing. But it is within this same period that VAT traders are not even returning VAT that they collect on behalf of government. So it tells us that while government is struggling and going around borrowing either on the domestic treasury market or looking for loans from international partners, there are a lot of revenues within that we are not even collecting. And that's what the Fiscal Recklessness Index shows us. And so this is what I was talking about. 90% of the tax irregularities are traced, or financial irregularities are traced to tax. Other issues like payroll are unearned salaries, where people have been transferred or people are not even in the organization, but salaries are still being paid. So what we try to do is that every year that we do the Fiscal Recklessness Index, we try to juxtapose between 2 periods. So this time around, we look at the second Fiscal Recklessness Index and the third one. If you look at the two of them, what we observe is that when we did the second Fiscal Recklessness Index, the financial irregularities was about 13.9 billion Ghana cedis. And that's between 2015 and 2020. Between 2021 and 2023, the irregularities is 4.9 billion Ghana cedis. Even though in terms of composite sum, it has declined, but we see a positive growth trajectory that has also started, which means that the recklessness or indiscipline has started, because in the middle you see that it drops significantly, which means that either we stemmed the effort and trying to get these MDAs to work, but just right after 2021 we started misbehaving. Let me even put it that we started misbehaving again. And you remember that it was during COVID that we came up with a lot of measures to ensure that we are fiscally disciplined and all of that. But just right after COVID, we had all the COVID funds and we borrowed and started showing a little bit sign of recovery. Then we went back again. And that's why we see that right after 2021, see that upward growth in the financial irregularities. And we also look at the average year-on-year growth, and over the 5-year period, that is between 2015 and 2020, the average year-on-year growth of the financial irregularities was over 100%, which means that the irregularities seems to be growing in leaps and bounds. But even though at some point in time they decline, but largely in terms of composite sum, they are very significant. And just in the last 3 years, the year-on-year growth is around 18%, which means that we've started another positive growth, or we started incurring these financial irregularities again within a period where we are implementing a new public financial management reform program. So what is happening at the institutional level? And these are signs of weak institutional effectiveness. The institutions are not complying with the PFM rules. For example, in 2021, the Ministry of Finance awarded contracts for conference facilities of almost 1.2 million Ghana cedis without using any of the procurement methods in our Procurement Act, and it went through. And this is reported by the Auditor General. And so we compare the 2 periods, but what is staggering here is that it does appear that the irregularities have shrunk in the other typologies, and now the irregularities are highly concentrated around taxes. And this is not because maybe there are no businesses or that there are no revenues to collect to. These tax irregularities are actually largely monies that we know or arrears that we know, but we are not collecting them. That is weak compliance enforcement. But it is within this period too that we set up the Revenue Assurance and Compliance Enforcement Team. So how come the period where we have Revenue Assurance and Compliance team set up within the Ministry of Finance, it is within this period where you have a lot more financial irregularities related to tax. So between 2015 and 2020, when we did the assessment, 6.5 out of every 10 cedis of financial irregularities was taxes. But now 9 cedi out of every 10 of financial irregularity is tax irregularity, which means that is where our problem is within our PFM system. Another reason too is that what that also tells us is that all the compliance enforcement things that we say we are doing, we are spending on a lot of assorted IT programs, but they seem not to be delivering results. Because if they were delivering results, then we should be seeing a decline in the tax irregularities that the Auditor General is able to identify when they do the audit. And what that also tells us is that the internal audit systems are not working. Because, for example, if the internal audit systems are working, then wrong public procurement, cash irregularities will not be occurring. Because these are things that the internal auditor would have picked even before the external auditor comes to the agency. Which means that the internal audit function, even though they are there, but it's largely ineffective. What we try to also look here is that a lot more people have been pushed into poverty because of the macroeconomic crisis that we are going through. Higher inflation, exchange rate depreciation, which means that the real value of people's income has actually depreciated. And so we wanted to look at the poverty reduction programs that we have in our national social protection programs. How much do we actually spend on those programs, and juxtapose that to the financial irregularities? And so every year we try to compare the financial irregularities to the GDP of that year. And you see that, and this is the Ghana School Feeding Program, that is the green bar. And this is the Livelihood Empowerment Against Poverty Program. These are the two popular or the two main poverty reduction or social protection programs in our national social protection policy, which means that they are the two main vehicles that government want to use to address poverty. Now, how much we are actually spending on these programs as a share of GDP is lower than the financial irregularity or the fiscal recklessness in our ministries, departments, and agencies. So, for example, averagely, if we are seeing financial irregularities for just between even 2021 and 2023 being about 0.7% of GDP, and how much we spend on LEAP being about 0.5% of GDP. That tells you that how much we lose, or the savings that we are not unable to make, are higher than how much we are spending on poor people. For example, if you look at the LEAP, it's supposed to be a bi-monthly payment, which is every 2 months. But the recent World Bank report shows that since 2019, government is unable to meet the bi-monthly payment, which means that now government is able to make maximum 4 times payment in a year instead of the 6. In some years, government actually made 3 times payment, which means that poor people or those on the LEAP had to wait sometimes other 4 months before they can get their cash transfer in bulk. Instead of the bi-monthly, that's supposed to be a cash transfer or a cash grant to sustain them and reduce poverty. Now, because there are no revenues to fund those programs, there are delays in revenue mobilization. Government is unable to fund those programs, and the World Bank report on our social protection clearly shows that we don't seem not to have enough to finance these programs. And so the beneficiaries on the LEAP are not actually getting their money every 2 months. Since 2019, some of them have to wait every 4 months. And so how effective would our poverty reduction programs be if we can't finance them? If you look at the Ghana School Feeding Program, the caterers have been complaining and fighting that the money is not enough. So in the 2023 budget, the government said, okay, we've heard your cry. We'll increase it from 1 cedi to 1 cedi 20 pesos per child per meal in a day. So per day, if you look at the basic schools, all the schools that are under the school feeding program, each child, government spend 1 cedi 20 pesos on each child. Now, that one CD, 20%, the total beneficiary, they are about 3.8 million children. Averagely, they spend about 180 days in school. Now, if you look at just the financial irregularities between 2021 and 2023, that 4.9 billion, if all that money was saved and put into the Ghana school feeding program, it could have fed each child by 6 Ghana cedis per day. 6 Ghana cedis per day. That is 5 times what government is actually able to provide. Meanwhile, these are monies that have not been collected or savings that have been lost. But these are monies that could have been collected to support some of the major social protection programs we have in the country. But because of weak compliance enforcement, lack of commitment to real institutional reforms and fiscal discipline, we are unable to do that. And so that's what we illustrate here. So you can clearly see that government actually, if we address these financial irregularities, we will be able to rake in more revenue to support these important social interventions. And so fiscal discipline, as we keep drumming, is more about saving the poor and creating room so that we address social inequality. Because some of these monies could have definitely gone into support even the free senior high school. Recently, you saw the documentaries on the kind of food the children were eating under the school free senior high school program. But financial irregularities just between 2021 and 2023 was almost 90% of how much you have actually spent on the program between 2017 to 2021. And that is why we keep drumming home and calling for commitment to fiscal discipline. Findings 2. So this is where we put all of those financial irregularities into an index. Now, these are the fiscal recklessness score. So what this means is that in 2021, 95% of the financial irregularities could be traced to the Ministry of Finance. In 2022, almost 89% could be traced to the Ministry of Finance. In 2023, almost 90% of the financial irregularities could be traced to the Ministry of Finance. And the reason is that the Ministry of Finance have the oversight function over the Ghana Revenue Authority. And so all tax irregularities will be traced to the Ministry of Finance. And so the Ministry of Finance is the most fiscally reckless MDA in Ghana based on our assessment. And that is because the tax irregularities represent about 90% of the total financial irregularities, and because they have oversight over that aspect of our MDA, that is why they come on top as the most fiscally reckless institution. Apart from that, you see some critical ministries like food and agriculture, communications, roads and highways, all those linked to our sustainable development are demonstrating moderately high fiscal recklessness. And just a few agencies are demonstrating relatively lower fiscal recklessness. But let me also add that because the Ministry of Finance is also a central management agency, they have oversight over other agencies as well. So some irregularities can be traced to them. But what we found is that the reasons for the tax irregularities are not management problems. They are not oversight problems, or maybe they don't have the enough laws or the tools to actually work, but they are as a result of weak compliance enforcement and negligence on the part of public officials. For example, not collecting revenues is sheer negligence. Also, the fact that if you look at, we've implemented a lot more IT solutions in our system and we should see much more returns and it's not showing. That tells us that there are weaknesses in the effectiveness of the way these institutions do their work. And so the fiscal recklessness is a reflection of the weak institutional effectiveness. And so we do the ranking. So when we rank the institutions, the top 5 fiscally reckless institutions are Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Food and Agriculture, Ministry of Communication, Roads and Highways, and Health. And these are very critical ministries. But we also try to compare the results to the second fiscal recklessness and to also look at what have been some of the relative movement, which MDA seems to be improving it by way of reducing their level of financial irregularities. And we see that at the top, Ministry of Finance, unchangeable. Since the last time, it's not changed. Second, what was shocking is that between 2015 and 2020, the Ministry of Food and Agriculture was ranked the 12th most reckless institution. That's moderately risky, moderately reckless. But now they are the second most reckless, which means that in terms of their commitment to fiscal discipline, they actually have gotten worse in just 3 years after the assessment. If you look at the Ministry of Communication today, we're 14th. Now they are 3rd. They have actually gotten worse. Then what was shocking is the Ministry of Health. They were the second fiscally reckless, even though here that seems to be an improvement, but they are still in the top 5. The ministry in charge of health and also delivering water and sanitation and all of that, if we see all of these MDAs on the top 5 fiscally recklessness, what that translates to is that the ability to deliver quality service at the community and the district level is also diminished, because these are revenues or monies that they could have saved. However, we identified a few ministries who have also actually made some good progress. So, for example, Ministry of Chieftaincy, they've actually been at the bottom of the recklessness index, which means that at least they've been stable in terms of managing the level of financial irregularities that they incur. Then one significant one was the Ministry of Trade, 7th in the last assessment, and now 21st in the recent assessment. So this actually shows us the relative movement, but the top 5 are what is really, really important to us. What are the drivers? So we try to put all the drivers we identify in a fishbone diagram. And what we see is that there is weak compliance enforcement in terms of enforcing and collecting the revenues that we actually need. So we know a lot of revenue arrears. And in the last PFM reform program, this was strongly highlighted that we are unable to manage our tax revenue arrears. And that is showing in the Fiscal Recklessness Index. Then there's also weak oversight in terms of monitoring and evaluation of these MDs. What we see is that the more this fiscal recklessness is consistent, what that means is that they are not abiding by the Audit Review Committee's report. Because after the Public Accounts Committee have sat, they give recommendations at the institutional level. So if at the institutional level, internal audit was working and the Audit Review Committee's report is respected, some of these things should have been addressed. So the fact that these things are not being addressed also tells us that there's very little commitment to the work that is being done by the audit review committees. Then there is weak enforcement of sanctions. Sometimes you see blatant abuse of the procurement rules, but there's no sanction applied. Most of these businesses who actually owe the government, for example, some of the OMCs, their debts are rescheduled, and after it is rescheduled, the GRA is supposed to apply sanctions, but the Auditor General identified instances where sanctions are not applied. And we really want to understand why these sanctions are not applied. For example, in the cash management, when people fraudulently withdraw money from government coffers, there should be sanctions, but we don't see those sanctions being applied. So we see a very weak enforcement of sanctions in our procurement system. That is also because the audit review committees at the institutional level, if you look at their composition, it's like asking people to watch over themselves. If they can watch over themselves, then all of those irregularities you identify wouldn't have occurred. So the composition of the audit review committees don't allow them to be effective. Then that is also compounded by the weak internal audit systems that we have. The internal audit systems are supposed to check all of these things and ensure that the PFM rules are abided by, or the MDAs commit to the PFM rules. But because the internal audit function is broken or has not been effective for a long time, we see that all of these irregularities are things that they could have spotted. For example, if they were in the gift system and part of public procurement in the agencies, if you are procuring with the wrong method or you are procuring without using any of the approved methods, they would have identified it. Because the internal audit function is not working, that's why we see a lot of this recklessness. But what is also interesting this time around is that we are going into elections. And so I'm sure by now you have heard a lot of the assorted promises that have been given by the political parties. The risk is that if we don't stem the bleeding, all of the menu of promises that they have presented, they are going to implement them, whether they are important or not. IMANI's manifesto analysis shows that at least 56% of promises in party manifestos end up in public policy. So whether they are good or not, they will end up in the coordinated program and it will be costed in budget. And so we need to find a way to stem the bleeding and ensure fiscal discipline. So what we did as part of this year's fiscal recklessness is that we wanted to look at what are the parties promising in terms of addressing fiscal indiscipline. First, we start with the ruling party. The government says, the current government, the NPP says, they are going to cut 3% of public expenditure and give it to the private sector, which means that private sector will now be brought into our public expenditure. So they will find about 30 billion to come and support government public expenditure, mainly in public infrastructure and goods and services. That is because these are the only areas that we have some room to play with. That's the goods and services and also the capital expenditure. But what we found is that we have a very weak public procurement system. In 2022, IMANI analyzed over 1,000 public procurement transactions. What we found is that transactions that were high financial value, they use single sourcing. And transactions that were low financial value, they use competitive tender. And also what we found is that the entity tender committee's architecture doesn't allow them to be accountable, because most of the people on the entity tender committee are largely from the institution or appointed by the president. So if you look at the overarching public procurement infrastructure architecture, most of the people we want them to have oversight over public procurement are appointed by the president. So how can they keep themselves in watch? So the problem we have with that promise is that if you are giving 3% of public expenditure to be provided by the private sector, which means that it is going to be sourced through procurement, how do we address the challenges in our procurement system and ensure value for money? Which means that we will need smart tracking of actual cost and ensure that procurement contracts are awarded with strict adherence to value for money. Because if we don't do that, the private sector will give us a cost that may not be reflective of the work that they have done. And we have seen some before where a member of the PPA board, who was also leading the value for money committee within the PPA, was actually found selling contracts. And the president had to fire the person. And so this is the level of weaknesses within our procurement system. So if you are going to implement such a promise, then we must be mindful of our public procurement system. And we have challenges with even expenditure tracking and value for money. So that is a challenge we have with this promise that the NPP wants to implement. Another thing is that they also want to roll out the gift miss system. Yes, the gift miss system, government keeps adding more and more people onto the gift miss program. But we realize that even in the institutions where the gift miss is there, we have seen people fraudulently withdrawing, people embezzling funds, payments are done without supported documents, and all of that is showed in the Auditor General's report, which actually tells us that it is building institutional effectiveness that can stem or stop this fiscal indiscipline. Another thing that we also identify is that the NPP promises to legislate the Fiscal Advisory Council. Now, what we observe across all the political parties is that I think they've all come to a point where they've agreed that no reform seems to be working. And so now our only bullet to address fiscal indiscipline and ensure adherence to the PFM is that we should have a fiscal council. And that fiscal council will not just be a fiscal council set up like a committee, but a fiscal council that is backed by a law and has the power to bite. And that is what will address the fiscal indiscipline that we are looking for. So we found out that the NPP said they are going to legislate the Fiscal Advisory Council because the one that they set up was not legislated, and it became more like an advisory committee to the president. Another thing is that they also want to ensure regular transfer into the DACF. Some of the irregularities that you see is also because some of these MDAs overly estimate their revenue. And so when they are unable to make that much revenue, they can't finance their budget. So they may have to now retain some of the monies they collect on behalf of government to undertake some of their budgetary activities, or sometimes because allocations come late, they tend to use some of government revenues to do some of those activities. And so they said they want to comply. Currently, the government owes the DACF almost 6.3 billion Ghana cedis. And so we want to see how they can ramp up revenue mobilization and ensure commitment to the DACF. Another thing they said they want to implement is a local public accounts committee, which will sit and also have oversight over the MDAs at the local level. But we think that this promise will be a duplication of role, because the public accounts committee, they sit at the regional level. And when they sit at the regional level, they're able to invite these institutions at the regional level, and sometimes they even bring some of them to the national level. So having another layer of local public accounts committee really does not address the fiscal indiscipline. It is after the fact. And we don't need ex post again. We want something that can really address the problem where it is occurring. Another challenge is that these MDAs already have audit review committees, who are supposed to implement the recommendations of the Auditor General. So this promise will just be adding another layer to what already exists. This is what the NDC is also saying in terms of addressing fiscal recklessness. What they say is that they want to also advance revenue mobilization by cutting out certain taxes that they think that is creating a lot of burden on the on citizens, or they think that because there's too much taxes, that is why people are unable to comply or pay their taxes. But what we also found is that in 2017 and 2018, we abolished a raft of taxes. At least more than 7 taxes were abolished by way of accelerating or encouraging tax compliance. But between 2017 and 2018, revenue collection or total revenue that came to government, the government experienced a shortfall of almost 1.6 billion in 2017 and about 1.8 billion in 2018, which means that cutting the taxes does not quickly translate to collecting more revenue. But what the Auditor General actually tells us is that it is because of weak compliance enforcement. That is why we are not collecting the taxes that people owe. And so that is the challenge we have with that simply reducing or cutting taxes, while it is good, you need more compliance enforcement to collect the ones that is in the system. Then again, they also committed that they will review and enforce the Fiscal Responsibility Act. That means that they will commit to the 5% deficit ceiling within the act, but they will review it. And also, they also commit to also establishing an independent fiscal council, which is the same as what the NPP want to do. But what we didn't find in the NDC's manifesto is that they didn't say whether they are going to legislate it. Because if it is not legislated and backed by law, then it also then becomes another committee. So that is the challenge that we also find with that promise. But generally, the two major parties align on the idea that we need a fiscal council to actually check our fiscal mismanagement. Then again, they also want to also promote public-private partnership to support infrastructure financing. Then the Movement for Change, the new political party on the block, and this party was formed by a member of the ruling party. What they say is that they will also commit to the fiscal deficit ceiling in the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which is actually in line with the expectation of the IMF program that at least by 2027, the fiscal deficit will be below 5%, which means that their promise is a bit in line with the program that we have. But what they say that is striking to our PFM and may put us at risk is that they said they want to eliminate sole sourcing from our PFM. What they mean is that they are going to eliminate single sourcing, and that will put us at risk. What that means is that if there's an emergency or there is a particular transaction that only a single vendor can supply, there's no method to actually procure that. And that's the challenge we have with these promises. So what we picked up from the political parties going into the election is that they all seem to agree that no reform seems to be working. The only thing that they all believe can work is that we need an independent fiscal council. And we need it as now. And that we need a fiscal council that has the power to bite. And so going into our recommendations, the flag that IMANI will be waving from next year when a new government comes to power is that we need to set up a fiscal council, and that fiscal council must be set up right. And this is what we are recommending, that the Independent Fiscal Council must have the power to bite. That is, we should give that fiscal council the power to oversee the big ticket expenditure items of the government so that they are able to accurately report and say that this thing that you want to do, it will jeopardize our fiscal planning or our fiscal target, and it wouldn't deliver value for money. We need also a fiscal council that will be granted the powers to even oversee some activities within the Ministry of Finance. For example, we found out that at the debt management office at the Ministry of Finance, there was only one person working there. And also, because there are other activities the ministry does, sometimes it makes it difficult for them to have complete oversight and perform their core mandate. And so we believe that some activities like debt management, macro fiscal planning, forecasting, and other big ticket expenditure items from the government, it must be reviewed, assessed, and approved by the Fiscal Council before we go ahead, because they will be able to tailor it to our fiscal plan and ensure that we stay within our target and we are not indiscipline. What we are also proposing is that we scan around and found out that in Jamaica, now they've realized that they need a bipartisan even approach to even address their fiscal indiscipline. In Kenya, we see that the Ministry of Finance is now even bipartisan. So countries that really went into severe macroeconomic challenges with us during COVID, they have started learning their lessons, but we have not. But what we believe is that the Fiscal Council can help us learn that lesson. And so we believe that that fiscal council, even if we can't do the bipartisan approach, it should be a fiscal council whose members, in terms of how we appoint people into the fiscal council, it is advertised, and these who are interviewed by the Public Service Commission, their names are put out there, and even the work that they do, they should deliver at least about 2 reports every year, like what PIAC does, where they are able to tell us the fiscal plan of the government, where we are going, major interventions taken by government, and whether we are on track or we are working out of track. Then again, what we also even want the Fiscal Council to have is that they should have the power to punish. Because what we've seen is that over the years, all the sanctions we put in our PFM system, none of them is being applied. Even the Public Accounts Committee is not enforcing its power to sanction. Even the Auditor General is not enforcing the disallowance and surcharge powers that he has been giving them. So let's give some of that power to the Fiscal Council, so that if MDAs ignore them, do not comply with their directives, that Fiscal Council will have some sort of power to sanction MDAs. Then we also want to propose that some of their reports too should even be unredacted. So we get to see the true contribution of each of the members on the Fiscal Council. What was their judgment on this government transaction or activity? Because we believe that that is the surest way for stemming the bleeding, surest way for bringing some sort of accountability within the system. Because now we've seen 5 reforms, nothing is happening. We have passed the Fiscal Responsibility Act. The act was suspended and we never went to the act again. And so we need an independent Fiscal Council to help us, put us on track and keep us in check. But in addition to that, we also propose that government must accelerate these digitization initiatives that they have come up with. Now there's e-VAT, e-filing system. Let's accelerate them because we have already paid for them. So let's accelerate them and use them effectively to collect the taxes that people owe. Then the PFM reforms and IMF program must prioritize building effective institutions. All the time we do short-term measures, correct ourselves for the short term, and the moment the IMF is out of town, we go back to factory reset. That's because the institutions are not effective. So we need to prioritize building effective institutions rather than just providing minor support or reforms within those institutions. Then Parliament and the Auditor General must apply their sanctions, because without sanctions, we can't achieve any results that we are looking for. Then we need to also strengthen the internal audit functions in the MDAs. If internal audit function is working, almost 90% of these irregularities would have been addressed. And so thank you very much for paying attention and also listening to me. I'm very grateful. Thank you. Man.
I don't know what your key takeaways are, but for me, the one that jumped at me is that we are in an economic mess, and that mess is not created by Vladimir Putin in Ukraine or COVID-19, as we've always been hearing. And so if you have questions now, this is a time to ask. You just show me your hand and I'll have the microphone brought to you. If you have a comment, you can also make the comment. Let's take questions and comments now, please. If I have a hand up. Yes, please. Kindly bring the microphone to the front. Dennis, I have a question too. My question is, the fact that there are irregularities doesn't necessarily mean there are financial losses. Where's Dennis? Where's Dennis? Okay, good. So we are going to take the questions. Kindly take note. I want to know, the fact that we have irregularities doesn't necessarily mean there are financial losses. So that irregularities could mean maybe mistakes, but okay. All right, thank you. Oh, so the team that helped Dennis put this together, Amprofi Ajimai, right? I got that correct. Ransford Broby, Lydia Quist, Josephine, and I can't say the last one. Caroline, your handwriting is not good. You have to work on it. Thank you so much. Thank you. I think we can celebrate all the individuals. Maybe later on you can bring them so we see those who helped you do this work. And what I like about Imani is that this research is done usually by very young people. The first time I came here, was it you and Barbara who did something about 2019? It was such a nice work. Franklin Kujo, we should give you we salute you. Thank you. That's the president of Imani Africa. He's hiding in the back. He doesn't want me to acknowledge him. Franklin Kujo, thank you. Bro, please ask your question. Introduce yourself and ask us your question.
My name is Justin Sui, and I'm from the Netherlands Embassy in Accra. You mentioned weak enforcement as one of the drivers for the fiscal discipline. I've just been thinking, how does the establishment of a fiscal council really addresses the issue of weak enforcement? Because from where I sit, I don't think we need a fiscal council in Ghana to ensure fiscal discipline. Ghana, we already have enough laws that can ensure fiscal discipline. The Public Financial Management Act, if properly implemented, if properly implemented, even the Parliament Finance Committee, if they are to do their work very well, I'm not sure we should have the kind of fiscal indiscipline that we are seeing. Thank you. So the question really is, how does the establishment of a fiscal council help to address fiscal indiscipline?
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. All right, do you have other comments and questions? Just show your hand. Yes. Yes, thank you so much. So kindly introduce yourself and then.
Thank you. Permit me to say because of some health.
It's fine, sir.
Clement Amampagos, GRA. I want to ask Dennis whether he's aware over the years from 2020 to date, GRA has been making this target and in some cases exceeding. In tax administration, at any point in time, there may be some debt stock which you use all the enforcement powers you have to collect. As you speak, there are a number of OMCs in court facing prosecution. But he kept on mentioning, GRA is not collecting the revenues. GRA is not collecting the revenues. So how come are we able to collect and exceed our targets in 2020, even when COVID faced us and there were a lot of challenges we met?
Okay.
That's the question I want to.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dennis. So is it that we lowered the targets so low so we can achieve it, or we are just pretending to have achieved it? I'm sure that's. I know they give it to you and say go and bring the money, and you bring it and say you brought it. But the money, we are not seeing it. Okay, Dennis, you answer the question. Anybody else? Anybody else? Yes.
Thank you. I'm Solomon with the Ghana Anti-Corruption. So mine is an addition to what.
No, raise the mic a bit.
So for me, I don't think we need a fiscal council to also enforce, because as he said, we already have a number of laws. We have the parliamentary committee that sits on some of these issues. But it seems they are just interested in sitting, talking about that. We don't see any action. So for me, I would be interested in the part taking more action for enforcing those sanctions of the legislation. And then I also have a question to the GRA. In fact,
he has not come here to answer GRA questions. So
it's just about what he said. Because I think I was in a meeting sometime back and someone also asked the same question. So if GRA has been meeting with targets over the years, how can we still go through the IMF and other international market to borrow? So if
okay. 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 He says here, Tisikasu, why are we going to IMF? Maybe you can answer if you have answer. Please give him the microphone. Let's get a quick answer from there before we come to Dennis later. Yes. No. Here, in front of you.
My answer is just simple. Even as an individual, if your expenses exceed your income, definitely you go out and borrow. So as Dennis was saying at the other side, we could also be prudent in our spending and ensure that the little we have, we put it into good use. then we will be good. And GRA doesn't supervise the spending of what we have collected. Every year we appear before the Parliamentary Finance Committee or Public Account Committee, which is being live for all to see. All the challenges in there that the Auditor General will identify will be asked and answered. And in some cases, the Auditor General's reps are there to confirm whether we've been able to overcome those challenges before you declare to go.
Yeah.
So we need to do more, and there should be avenues also to collect more if our expenses keep on increasing.
Okay.
So that is the simple answer.
All right. Thank you. Do I have other questions or comments? Yes, at the back, behind you. Yes. No, we cannot hear you. Can you change the microphone? Nope.
Good morning.
Good.
So, maybe two questions. The first one is around how can we adjust for the level of fiscal responsibility of these MDs? Looking at the Ministry of Chieftaincy in the ranking, to say, will it be fair to rank them against Ministry of Finance, because the level of fiscal responsibility is different, right? The other thing is, have we done anything in this report, or maybe outside this report, to try to understand what these PFM reforms have typically targeted over the years, and whether it's had any direct impact on these financial way of life?
Okay. Very well. Thank you so much. Do I have any other more comments or questions? Yeah, there are questions at the back.
My name is Morris. I work with GTV.
Okay.
So I'm just imagining what the newspapers will be saying tomorrow. That the finance ministry is
very reckless.
Reckless in terms of the fiscals. Are we going to be fair to the finance ministry? I mean, given the fact that if you compare that ministry to the Ministry of Chieftaincy, they have the agencies that do the big ticket, businesses. So certainly some of these things will come up. And if you also look at the fact that at a point some OMCs were not paying their taxes, certainly they are going to pay at a point. So if you capture that and then you say the finance ministry is the most reckless in terms of fiscal discipline, are we going to be fair to that ministry?
Very well. Thank you. Dennis, I think you can take the questions. We'll come back for round 2 and then we can wrap up. So please come up.
Thank you very much for the question. So I think my colleagues can also come and bail me out sometimes. At some point in time, they should come and bail. I'm Profi Ransford, Lydia. Maybe if you can get close to the podium. Okay. I'll let Mr. Kujo make a few remarks. Then I'll answer a few of the questions that have come in. So, Mr. Kujo, he's coming here.
Thank you very much. I think on the question of fiscal council, I tend to disagree that the fact that we have other institutions and so we shouldn't have fiscal council. The fiscal council's work is not just going to be just ordinary work. If we had a fiscal council that was actually really allowed to work, we would have had proper reviews, probably quarterly reviews or yearly reviews of most of the big ticket transformational projects that we have in this country. And I think that one, and not just publishing the reviews, but actually going ahead and sanctioning even the Ministry of Finance is the type of fiscal council we are looking out for. We are not looking out for a very dormant fiscal council. No, that's not what we are asking for. Let me leave that. Let me stop here and then continue.
Okay, so just picking up from where Mr. Kujo also left, you remember that we developed a very tight Petroleum Revenue Management Act and had an LI, but we went ahead to set up the Public Interest and Accountability Committee. The purpose was that we needed an independent body that can actually check, report, and also hold government accountable. That sort of fiscal counsel, as Mr. Kujo is saying, that is very powerful to pull the brakes. That is what we are looking for. It's not a fiscal counsel that's only advisory or report, but that has the power to actually pull the brakes sometimes. And most of these fiscal recklessness that we see are because there are no checks and balances. And as I started, I mentioned that 47% of your COVID expenditure did not really go to do COVID work. Currently, GVG, we still don't know how much value they've added to telco revenue monitoring. So all of those big ticket things tells you that something is not working well and we need a much more stronger oversight. That's why we propose that. Then on the question of GRA meeting its target, yes, every year we hear that publication and the news that GRA is meeting its target. But in terms of setting the target, you would agree with me that there have been reports also that shows our tax capability and how much actual taxes that we are collecting and showing the gap. And so despite the fact that GRA meets all of its targets, what we are interested in is the inactions. For example, the uncollected revenues. For example, if you read the Auditor General's report, where since maybe 2021, certain actions keep reoccurring, even though there are some that you are fighting in court, but the magnitude of inactions that are happening within the Auditor General's report, I think that is what we are very, very much concerned about. And that is where we have problem with the GRA. Okay.
That is the issue is as
yeah.
When you take a given year, say 2023, you can never end the year by collecting every tax which was due.
Yeah.
There will definitely be some of the debts outstanding. So the ability to collect or the actual collection will be done in the ensuing year. So this report covers 2022, 21 to 23. So I would have been very happy if you reconciled your figures today and see the real effect, whether those debts have been collected or not, before you can say there are these debts that have not been collected. And in any case, if a debt is not collected, I beg to differ when you say that is due to fiscal recklessness, because there may be other challenges which you may use all your enforcement tools to collect, but will still not be successful. And that is why you proceed to court for prosecution. And when the matter is escalated to court, you have little hand in deciding how it should go. So on that score, we are doing our best. And we shouldn't be tagged as being fiscally reckless. Thank you.
Okay, so what we also observe from the Auditor General's report is that when we take the report, we read every line by line the auditor's comment to look at why this irregularity is actually flagged. And sometimes we see where debts are rescheduled, and I know that is also part of what you do. You reschedule the debt, and when they are unable to pay, sometimes there are sanctions that must also follow. But there are instances where the Auditor General do the assessment and say that sanction was not applied. And we see that also in the report. In fact, what we wanted to actually do this year is that we wanted to adjust or look at what, after PAC has sat down and done all the reconciliations, what was still outstanding. But we traced the report. We didn't get them. And that is one of the things that we highlight as limitation. So we recognize that, yes, at some point in time, some of them will be recovered, but some of them sometimes too are not recovered. For example, if you look at the PAC report in 2019, after the reconciliation, there were still a significant outstanding ones that had not been recovered. So we think that the fiscal recklessness is also referring to sometimes some of the inactions that may be deliberate or let me say negligent, that we have not actually done or enforced the law. Those are some of the things that we are flagging up, that once we drive the advocacy, part of it too is that we've seen a lot more investment in electronic systems. For example, the EVAT program, the e-tax filing. So when we see the report being replete with VAT traders not actually returning VAT that they have collected on behalf of government, that is where we have problem with the enforcement. Please, I hope you get where we are also coming from. And that is what we will call fiscal recklessness. And so we are not tagging you as bad, but we are saying that there are a lot of inactions that create fiscal recklessness. Thank you very much. Okay. Then other things that also came up was, I think the fiscal council question has been answered. Then on the issue of Umaru, whether uncollected represent loss, we recognize that it's not at all points. So if you look at the definition, how the Auditor General defines irregularity, maybe I should just quickly go there. And if you see how the Auditor General defines these irregularities, that is either losses that had been incurred by the state through impropriety or lack of probity in the actions or decisions, or on the other hand, savings that could have been made. So there are instances where they actually translate to real losses. So for example, if a ministry uses the wrong procurement method to procure and you don't get value for money, you have lost that money. And also we found even just one report by the Public Accounts Committee that we were able to cite, we see that after their reconciliation, there were still outstanding ones that have not been collected. And when we followed some of the videos of the PAC, sometimes the offenders cannot even be found. So those monies have been lost. And so these are some of the issues that we find that there are instances of real losses that actually do occur. Then there was a question on whether we adjust for financial prudence of maybe one ministry against the other. For now, maybe our methodology has not looked at that, but it can be a recommendation that we will take up in the future. But what we believe is that sometimes the more revenues that also come in, we also see sometimes very high leakages. And so maybe some of those institutions, either they are prudent, they commit to maybe the PFM rules and the Auditor General do not find significant irregularities, or maybe not enough funds or not much funds actually go through those agencies. And the question about the Ministry of Finance, you remember that I mentioned that even in the report, and every year we've done the Fiscal Recklessness Index, we mentioned that they are also a central management agency. And to some other agencies or departments, fiscal recklessness can be traced to them because they have oversight over those agencies. And one of them is like GRA. That is why taxes relate to GRA. But when the Auditor General reports, it reports it directly to the Ministry of Finance because they have oversight function over the GRA. So what our assessment is fair. If you say they are the most fiscally reckless institution, that is also because when you look at the underlying drivers of the irregularity, most of them can be avoided. And the internal audit agency, the leader, has consistently mentioned that if internal audit functions were taken serious in these MDAs, some of these irregularities would not be occurring. And that is the advocacy that we are pushing through this report. So if my colleagues are here, maybe I might have missed something. Profi, Lydia, would you want to add anything to it? Then I also forgot to add Dr. Theo Champon. He actually led us on this work. So I don't know if I've answered every question. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Is Dr. Theo Champon here?
No.
Oh, okay. Yes, no. Okay, good. Can we take a few more questions or comments before we wrap up? Do you have any outstanding issues to clear? There's a hand at the back. Okay.
So my name is Martin. I am for I would like to ask, what is the involvement of the Auditor General? Because I look at the reports, and the report often don't carry the coverage that will be done of the irregularities. So I think that maybe going forward, we should look at getting the Auditor General's involvement in this report. Policy and normal work, we really don't work. So please, let's maybe move a step further.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, you can pass the microphone. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Just a great output put out there by IMANI.
permit me to add my voice to.
Can you please introduce yourself?
My name is Daoud, Hambali Daoud. I work for GIZ. I'm a technical advisor at GIZ. I'd like to add my voice on the advocacy for strengthening internal audits. In fact, it's not only the the head of the internal audit agency who started advocacy for strengthening internal audits. Before former Auditor General Dr. left, one of his strongest advocacies was that we should strengthen internal audits, and that is important because they have the best eye view of everything happening in organizations. And I'd like to recommend that civil society organizations and you, Mr. Omari, on your platform, I'd like you to strongly advocate for strengthening internal audits. Internal auditors are some of the most vilified public servants in Ghana. They are played around like chess. One small mistake or one small finding they make, they are transferred as punishment. It's okay, they do that. They are moved around all over the place. For some time now, I think over the last 3 years, the Internal Audit Agency has been pursuing reforms in internal audits, trying to establish a more independent internal audit architecture for the country. That has seen some challenges in progress. We are told on a daily basis that the bill will be put before Parliament. We don't see that happening. And so a lot of what we are seeing here is a result of weak internal audits, but also result of unethical behavior from especially leadership of most organizations. And I'm not even going to mention politicians. A lot of the time we try to lump everything and put it on politicians, but there are a lot of people who hide behind these excuses, this lumping we put on politicians, and then go around to do a lot of things, knowing very well that at the end of the day, we are going to lump it up on politicians. Just like this report has done, put everything on the Ministry of Finance. We've not seen what the various components are. It's really be good for us to see what the various components of this recklessness are. So, but I'd like to end by saying that we need to strengthen the advocacy for strengthening internal audits. And not just internal audit, but audit in general, but more specifically internal audits, because internal auditors are there when the action is taking place. Internal auditors will come at the end of the year to by that time the evidence is gone.
Thank you.
But internal audit needs to be strengthened. And I like to advocate that civil society organizations, the media, all of them are here. We should not prioritize what politicians say. He says, they say, this person says, who sits where. No. Let's focus on what matters to the people of Ghana.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is important that we advocate for internal audit.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Do we have any other comments? Yes, please bring it to the front. Dr. Daniel Yaodomelu, I'll come to you, by the way, so please prepare. Even whether or not you have a comment or question, I'm bringing a microphone to you. Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Antonia. I'm here with the Danish Embassy, and I just have a practical question as to when the report is available, because I was just checking on the website. So if you could kindly give us the link or send an email out when the report is available.
Thank you so much, Dennis. So when the report will be available and how people can get it. Do you have any other comment or question before? Yes.
Just a little clarification again. Why is it only on ministries? Because the presentation shows that it's ministries, department, and agencies. I was expecting to see Bank of Ghana and Cocoa Board, which has been the center of fiscal indiscipline over the past few years. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other comment? Yes, this side.
Hi, I'm Harry from the British High Commission. Thanks so much for the presentation. Just one question, which was you mentioned things like single sourcing as being an issue, but then in that description there of how you make the index, it didn't include things like that. So I just wanted to clarify, because obviously what you show is that, you know, a lot of the issues purportedly are in the revenue space. So I just wanted to check, Is that because you're not capturing in this particular index things like single sourcing and I guess any other areas? If you could clarify what isn't captured, that would be useful. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think my last question, Mr. Domelevo, I have a question. The Fiscal Council bit, I want you to answer that question, whether it's really going to be the final solution to that problem. And also, you do your work, you give it to Public Accounts Committee, they bring people, they question them, and then what? Can you just answer that, because you are the man who has been you have been the author of this report in the past. Thank you so much. And also, if you have any other comment, you can make them.
Umaru, I think you are not fair to me.
I know.
I've not done any presentation here. So why do I have to answer questions?
Anyway, we want to tap into your brain.
For the benefit of the others, yes. If it's only for you, to have answered questions. So thank you very much. Well, first and foremost, let me say I commend IMANI Ghana very well. This work that you have done to bring to the fore how fiscally reckless some MDAs have been over the years. I buy that if you are talking about fiscal recklessness of the country, then this report is one of the Auditor General's reports. There are several other fiscal recklessness which are not contained in this report. So you may wish to expand the scope so that we have a better picture or understanding of the level of recklessness. I buy into your desperation again that much is not being done to address the recklessness, hence the call for fiscal council, which is very powerful. I was wondering how powerful they will be. Is it going to be made up of boxers or people who can shoot and kill? Because the tendency in Ghana is that we create institutions and they are also burdened on the same public funds. They don't perform. Then we create another one. If you heard me recently, I was talking about even fighting corruption. We've created so many anti-corruption institutions and we are not making progress. So in my considered opinion, the Attorney General, the Auditor General, the Director General Internal Audit, Public Accounts Committee, these institutions, we should wake them up. If they are up and doing, let me be honest with you, the Ministry of Finance will repent. Actually, that was the area I was targeting. I was aiming at 2021, attending only to Ministry of Finance, surcharging the minister and his chief directors. And I think that will have brought discipline. So I agree with you entirely that we should ensure the discipline comes down. But I don't think it is in creating another burden on the consolidated fund. We have done that for too often. And so please, let's look at the mandates that currently exist and see whether that cannot be executed within the mandates so that it will be cost beneficial as far as that is concerned. And well, I cannot agree more with the sentiment that you have expressed on issues of public procurement. And I was laughing to say that when you say some people say they are going to abolish single source procurement, and I said even the competitive tendering, it is fixed. Before they even start the process, they know who is going to win.
Wow.
So they are all scams. They are all methods of procurement which can be scammed. So we as a people may have to start first by having a critical look at the law. I cannot agree more with you on the law. The law itself creates problem for public procurement, and I've said this on several occasions, that if the Attorney General who is supposed to prosecute us is seated over there and he gives an advice and allow a bad procurement request to go through, is he going to prosecute when it comes? Mind you, no less a person than the Deputy Attorney General sits on the procurement board, representing the Attorney General. Odami, before he became Attorney General, was the one there. Now one of his deputies is there. And once Attorney General gives opinion or position, it is taken, more or less. And if in case it becomes scandalous, as we have seen some of them, what do you think will happen? Then look at the people who select the rest of the members. Minister of Finance, who does most of the procurement. And you go there for the exemption. And these are his people sitting there. So it will go through. No wonder at times when the single source procurement is approved, you and I, we are surprised. That even notwithstanding, I've also drawn attention, which I'll draw to today, that everyone should read the Public Procurement Act Section 40 carefully. At times, the board does not even have the mandate to give approval, but they give. Because the law does not just give them a mandate to approve, it gives them the conditions under which they can approve. And those conditions do not accrue before they do the approval. So there are several issues that I think we can address. I would not like to become the center of the reporting. The way I see the cameras looking at me, if I don't take time, they will not report on your program. So I want to say thank you very much for the good work.
Thank you.
I'll end it here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So that's former Auditor General Yaodomelovo. On a very depressing note there, you just depressed me further with a single and... anyway, Dennis, please come and answer your questions.
Thank you, Maru. So the link to the report will be shared through our mailing list. So if you are not on our mailing list, kindly leave your name at the registration desk. But also after the presentation, I think the PowerPoint and the main report will be published on our website. So please keep checking our website. You definitely have access to that. And we look at MDAs partly because that is where our resources can reach. That's how much work we can do so far. We know that there are times that we've looked at public boards and corporations in our procurement work before. So when we have enough resources, we'll be able to even expand it to other reports that the Auditor General also presents. So that's why we mainly focus on ministries, departments, and agencies. But going into the future, we will also look at bringing in other reports as well. Then the public procurement question. So procurement is part of the typologies of irregularities and is considered. Just that if you look at the quantum of the procurement irregularities and compare it to the overall composite irregularities, it looks very small. But when you go deep into that, they are very, very significant sums. And if you have read our public procurement report that we launched in 2022, you see a lot more issues coming there. So procurement is factored in here, whether single sourcing or whatever. Stores and procurement as a financial irregularity typology is factored in here. So just that comparing it to the overall, it is very small, and tax irregularity is the big one. And the question on expanding the scope, which I think the team would discuss. Then also maybe the fourth Fiscal Recklessness Index will do well to push for all the PAC reports so that we'll be able to do all the necessary adjustments and those recommendations that also came in. I don't know if I've left any other thing out. Would that be all? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can give Dennis and his team a round of applause. Thank you. That's been very extensive. Thank you so much, Dennis. Now, if you enjoy this, the next big thing Imani is doing is called IMANIfesto. It's happening on November 5th. It's going to track the performance of the government on its own manifesto, what it said it will do, and how it has done that, and do a scoring. Okay, Franklin, am I misleading the people? I think I'm misleading the people. You want to help? Or Franklin? Okay, please come and help before I lead them astray. Yes.
Yeah, only because you were involved in the last manifesto. Typically, we tend to analyze manifestos of subsisting governments as well. But we didn't have resources, so we couldn't do that this year. What we are going to do is a critical analysis of the manifestos of three parties: the MPP, the NDC, and the Movement for Change. That's what we are going to do. So critical analysis of all the manifesto promises, and this is on November 5th.
But you won't track the current manifesto.
Which one?
The one MPP is implementing now. You won't track.
No. There are good reasons we are not.
That's fine. Okay, I thought you would come and track and give us whether they fared F or D or A. Anyway, so yes, that will be on November 5th. Kindly take note and join us. Let me invite, for the closing remarks, Senior Research Associate with IMANI, Amprofi Ajiman, to do that for us.
Thank you, Maru. We thank you so much you were able to join us. First, thanks goes to Oxfam. Without Oxfam, it would not have been possible. Now, just to add a little bit of remarks, after listening to Mr. Domlevo, I think I'm torn in between whether we should push the advocacy for a fiscal council or we should resort to looking at the laws proper and making it more efficient. Now, when you look at the Fiscal Responsibility Act, that's 982, you will find that even Section 3 has a problem because Section 3 gives so much discretionary powers to the minister. He can, in the event of a force majeure or what they call severe economic crisis of some sort, can just say, well, we've suspended being fiscally responsible. That in essence shows that it's as though we are setting up ourselves to fail. And so we should really revisit. Ghana has so many laws, fine laws, which other countries copy from. We should revisit the gaps in the laws that we have at the moment and use that opportunity, which I think the 982 gives at Section 5, is it, for the minister to actually make certain significant changes to the law every 5 years. I think the law was enacted in 2018. So the next window is 5 years and it's up. Why don't we target our advocacy towards actually reviewing not only the object of the law, which is in Section 1, but also removing those powers? Can you imagine that after the minister has said that we have actually suspended being fiscally responsible, he has 30 days to actually report to Parliament and tell Parliament why we have actually suspended being fiscally responsible? So let's not set ourselves up to fail like we've done in the laws, but let's try to do things that are right so that we can save the public purse. We want to thank Dennis. Umaru, thank you as well. We thank all the dignitaries who've made it today. Oxfam, big thanks to you. We'll keep on doing this and hopefully expand and get more donors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ampravi. Thank you. And thank you, Imani. Thank you, Oxfam. And to you, the audience, you've been great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you for being a wonderful audience. My name is Umar Rusanda Amado. It's been great being your moderator. Meanwhile, there's a phone here. I don't know who the owner is. The person may kindly come and pick it up. Thank you so much. Lunch is at the back. You are free to go grab something before you leave. Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon, everybody.